At the start of the year, Ted and I gave our predictions for 2022. How are we doing? Let's find out starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
This is episode number 413 of the Debt Free in 30 podcast. It's airing on the last Saturday of July 2022, and as is our tradition for the month of August, we replay past episodes, so this is our final new episode for season number 8.
So we do a best of?
Well, it's kind of a best... yes, exactly. That's what we're going to do for the month of August.
Right.
Except this year, we're going to do it a little different in that I'm going to pick episodes that might not have been from this season. They might have been even farther in the past. So in September, we'll be back, all new episodes. But first, let's do a mid-year review of where we are at. So, Ted, welcome back. You, I'm sure, remember episode number 383, which aired on January 1st, 2022, where we gave our predictions for the year. I predicted that by the end of 2022, inflation would be lower than it was at the start of the year. How am I doing so far with that prediction?
It's not looking good.
It's not looking good, people.
What did I predict?
You predicted that it would be higher. Well, I believe I predicted by the end of the year it would be somewhere around 2%. Mm-hmm. And you said, well, it's not going that low.
Right.
Might be 3% or 4% or something like that. And so as we record this, it's somewhere around 7, 8, 9%, depending on whether you're looking at Canada, the US, or whatever. And if you're watching this in August, who knows, maybe it's 100%. I don't know what's going to happen.
Get your wheelbarrows out.
Get your wheelbarrows out. So my thought process at the time was that inflation was going up because we had a lot of fiscal stimulus.
Right. The money supply was huge.
Right. You know, we were in a pandemic all across the world. Mm-hmm. And so here you go. Here's money.
Money. Solves all problems.
Individuals, corporations, everybody got money from the... Well, not
money at everything.
But a lot of people got money from the government. And when you put a lot of money in, prices go up. That's just kind of how math works.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand. Now, I was of the view that, okay, the CERB, the Canada Wage Subsidy, all those things had stopped.
Right.
And so in 2022, the government would not be handing out as much money. They would not be running as big a deficit.
Right.
And as a result, the money supply would not be increasing at the same rate. Mm-hmm. Probably still going up, but not as great. And therefore, we would start to see a decline in inflation. And the other reason is nothing ever goes in a straight line forever.
Correct.
So I don't think it's reasonable to predict that at some point we'll have 10,000% inflation.
Not in this country.
Not in this country. Other countries, it has happened. Now, you were less positive.
Right.
What was your thought process as to why inflation wasn't going to be coming back down?
Well,
to the same extent?
I was looking at the pent-up demand. So we know that during COVID, people were... there was increased saving. So all that money is sitting there someplace in the bank. As the world returned to normal, people are going to start spending that money. So even though the money supply overall, we're not handing out any more free money, we've stored up all this cash and now the demand is there. And so now we're pushing prices higher.
Yeah. So you were looking at the velocity of money.
Right.
As opposed to the
know me, speed.
I know you, man. You're the car guy. So now I'm not willing to admit failure on my prediction yet.
Right.
Because I didn't predict what the month of July or August was going to look like. I predicted the end of the year.
Right.
So I said the month of December, I expected it would be lower. So is it possible that I will still be right? Well, it ain't looking good.
Well, you know, the side of this that we didn't talk about a lot was the supply side of things. So normally, and I'm talking about now the supply of the goods that people are trying to buy. Between the pandemic and all the international logistical supply issues that are created and, you know, that little, what did they call it? Legal action?
Incursion,
there you go. The supply side of the equation has been messed up. So even if all the monetary things were self-correcting and ran itself out, you still have the problem that there isn't enough stuff for people actually to buy, so I can sell it for more.
Which presumably makes prices go up, and we can debate whether that's inflation or not.
Right.
But yes, that's certainly how it shows up. Now, the reason I'm not willing to concede defeat yet is because...
It's not December.
It's not December, exactly. So I look at a bunch of things, and you know I got all the fancy charts on my computer there.
Yep.
I look at things like the price of copper, which is some kind of metal that goes in all the wires or something.
Right.
Thinking maybe
Needed for our headphones.
It's in our headphones even as we speak. Well, if you look at where copper was a few months ago and where it is now, it's dropped by like 35%.
Right.
Now you might say, well, yeah, that's because it was up like 100% the 2 years before that. So, okay, it's not like it's come back down to 1960s levels, but that it has come down.
Right.
The price of gas at the pump.
Yep.
And again, I don't know what day everybody's watching this. Maybe the price is $3 a liter by the time this episode airs at the end of July, but price of gas has come down too.
Yeah, 10 or 15%.
Now, maybe, of course, it was really high and it came down. And does that mean anything?
It's still double what it was back in March of 2020.
This is true, but it's not inflation that's the problem. It's the rate of change of inflation that's the bigger problem.
Sure.
In my view, again, if you're an economist and want to come on the show, you know how to reach me. I'm on Twitter. I've tried to get some economists on, and they seem reluctant to debate some guy who clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. But for the last few years, inflation has sort of run around 2%,
right,
give or take.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I know every year inflation's 2%. Things are going up by 2%. I get a 2% raise at work. My pension goes up by 2%. It doesn't really have status quo.
Right.
If inflation was always 10%, okay, I get a 10% raise. My pension goes up by 10%.
Then nobody cares.
Nobody cares. But it's when it goes from 2% to 8 or 9 or 10%, that's when we get the problem. And that's where we are now.
Yeah.
But I'm of the view that it's more likely to come down. Now, the economists will tell you, okay, I'm totally wrong. And the way you know I'm totally wrong is because take a look at the unemployment rate.
Right.
It's at historically low levels.
But
I'm of the view that the reason it's low, well, obviously the economy's booming and all that. But
no, it's not.
We can debate that too.
But anyway,
I'm of the view that part of the reason the unemployment rate's low is because the labor force participation rate is low.
And I agree with you. I think people have exited the workforce, so now they're no longer being counted. Well, if you're not in the workforce, then you're not unemployed.
And the labor force participation rate is exactly that. Of the people who are old enough to work, so what percentage of them?
15-year-olds to 68-year-olds or something?
Something like that, yeah. How many of them are actually in the workforce? So obviously there will be some people who are in school, some people who are off, with illness, some people who are on maternity leave, whatever. So it's never going to be 100%. But if you look at the graph and you go back 10 or 15 years, it has been going down steadily. Obviously, it collapsed in the pandemic, came back, but it's still on that downward trend. So why do you think people have left the workforce?
So part of it is a natural aging process. Our population's getting older. The older you are, the less likely are that you're in there. And the other is there's so many different supports and other systems available that people that left the workforce for the pandemic, maybe they're not coming back.
Well, and if I was the parent of a young child,
when you used to be,
which I used to be,
I mean, you're still a parent,
but
they're not that young.
They're not young. And I was, before the pandemic, racing around to get up early, get them to daycare, get to my job, get back in time before daycare closes, or else I got to pay an extra fee, and racing around. And then when the kid has the sniffles, got to keep him home from school because you don't know if it's serious or not. Right. So now I'm taking time off work and my boss is mad at me. It's a whole big to-do. If I just stayed home with my kid and my spouse, was able to continue working, my income situation wouldn't be that dramatically different because now I'm not paying for childcare. I'm not, paying for gas to run around, and I'm not taking the wrath of my boss when I have to stay home with my kid. Right. So if I can work from home, not so big a deal, but if I'm working in an office or something, it's more of a big deal. So wouldn't it just be easier for me to take the next 2 or 3 years off until my kids are a bit older?
And I don't think long-term that's going to survive. I think this is part of it's an adjustment to what we've gone through in the last 2 years because of COVID and all of the things that have happened. And so there are people that deliberately aren't in the workforce, but between the effects of inflation and just the natural, I want more out of life, people are going to return to the workforce. So these numbers are all going to change
and
anyway.
That may in fact be the case. I guess we're going to find out. If I'm not working, things like the Child Canada benefit, child tax credits are based on family income.
Correct.
So if I'm not working, then I would get a higher tax credit.
You should. Yep.
And I'm also not paying for daycare and those other things. Yep. So between those two things, I'm not better off than if I was working, but it's a little bit closer.
Well, and if people could make that long-term adjustment, there'd be serious repercussions for our whole economy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't think it's a long-term adjustment that's going to work.
Right. And so this is why it is so difficult to predict the future.
And why economists won't talk to us.
Right, exactly. And why you should not listen to what we're saying, because what do we know?
Right.
Let me give you another example. So my inflation prediction, not looking good right now.
But neither's mine.
We both kind of undershot.
Right.
Consumer insolvencies. This is something you and I happen to be experts in, as opposed to everything else we've talked about so far. So if you look at how the numbers have gone, they peaked back in 2008, 2009, then they fell, and then they were on the rise. 2019, pretty busy year.
Right.
And then 2020 hit, boom, and they collapsed. And we've covered this many times on the show. Give us the 10-second reason why the number of people going bankrupt or filing a proposal has collapsed over the last couple of years.
So when the pandemic hit, the world basically went on hold, and that means the debt collectors went on hold. The biggest single one of those being Revenue Canada and your taxes, but also all of the commercial debt holders. Everyone put some kind of relief program in place. Everyone stopped pursuing you through the courts to give the world time to deal with the pandemic. The pandemic is mostly dealt with, and the commercial lenders are back being involved with their collection agencies, and the courts sort of. Revenue Canada isn't quite there yet. We're starting to see signs of it, though. So
I want to talk a bit about CRA in a minute.
Yep.
So when you look at the number of consumer insolvencies filed in Ontario, they were down in March of 2020.
Right.
They were up 0.5% in April. And then in May, which is the last numbers we have as we're recording this, they were up 23%.
This is of 2022.
Yeah, 2022 compared to 2021. So all we're doing is comparing 1 month this year to 1 month last year. So do you expect that this 23% increase that we saw in May is going to continue to accelerate? And when the numbers come out for June, July, August, September, it will continue getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
So the rate of increase over the prior year is going to continue at the rate that it's set. But I mean, we're still talking about, so it's increasing over a deflated number in the first place, but that's not really what you're asking.
So, so I'm trying to pin you down here because, as you know, Ben Rabideau was on this podcast a few weeks ago, and him and I made a bet,
right?
Because this become a gambling show apparently now. Mm-hmm. And he said that he expected that in the month of July, which is not finished yet, so we don't have the stats, but in the month of July, the consumer insolvency increase would be 25% or more as compared to the July of the past year. And like I said, in May, it was up 23%. So he's looking pretty good on that.
Yeah.
I said, no, I don't think it will be that high.
It's a little aggressive.
I could be like 0 for 2 on my major predictions. But what do you see in terms of that growth rate? Do you think it's going to be closer to like the 0.5% we saw in April, or do you think it's going to be closer to the 23% we saw in May going forward in the summer and fall of this year?
Well, so I think May was probably an aberration, and it's a larger number. So June, July, I think you're probably more like 10 or 11%, but it's going to continue to build all year.
And I think that makes sense. It's inevitable that it's going to increase because we're at 25-year lows right now.
And it's definitely going to, all the signs are there that it's going to get ridiculous. And I'm sorry to say that, folks. It's at some point, it's going to hit the fan.
And the reason we do this show, other than we've got big egos and like to hear ourselves talk.
Right.
And people are watching this now going, why are they wearing the same shirts they wore last week? Don't these guys even have 2 shirts they can wear? That's good.
I know.
Good
My
point.
wardrobe consists of white shirts
and dark
pants.
So we should have had the continuity people tell us to change our shirts. The reason we do this is not to gloat in the misfortune of others.
No.
It's to say, look, this is what we see potentially coming. If you know that it's going to rain tomorrow, hey, maybe I'll bring my umbrella with me.
Right.
Maybe I can prepare. That's the reason we're going through.
And we have to do this for our own practice. It takes us 6 months to properly train and gear up when we think things are going to get busier. So to properly provide the service that the public requires, we need to anticipate when is it going to get busier.
Right. Do I need to open more offices? Do I need more people? Do I need to buy more computers? What do I need to do? So we're always looking ahead as well. So there's no doubt that debt levels are still high.
Well, and we saw them retreat, credit card levels at least during the pandemic. That's reversed as predicted, and it's just going to get worse because of the inflationary pressures.
And on last week's show, we mentioned the numbers. The Bank of Canada target overnight rate at the start of the year was 0.25%.
Wow.
And today it's 2.5%, which, as you mentioned last week, is a 10 times increase.
Yep.
And okay, that's kind of a made up stat because your mortgage payment didn't go up by 10 times, I don't think.
Right.
Because it wasn't starting at near zero. But it's likely that interest rates will continue to increase, or have we hit the top already?
Well, so in January, I said by December it would be 2.5% to 3%. Clearly, I was wrong.
Well, no, you might be exactly right. If nothing changes, then you're bang on.
I think we're due for another couple rounds of this because, as we all know, the Bank of Canada lags behind when they should be doing things.
Exactly. And I totally agree with that you're fighting the last war. So I remember in December it was really cold, so I better bring a heavy coat to work today in the middle of the summer.
That makes sense. It's only going to be 32 degrees today.
So it's like, okay, I see your reasoning, but what you care about is what's going to happen tomorrow. So yes, if the Bank of Canada really thought interest rates should go up, and I'm not going to debate them on it,
right?
It's not my area of expertise, but if the point of increasing interest rates was to tamp down inflation, then why weren't they doing it 6 months or a year ago? Well, because it hadn't started yet.
And they were still in deep pandemic mindset, and the government wouldn't have allowed it anyway.
Well, but they're independent, Ted.
They certainly
The Bank of Canada is independent of all political influence, so it has nothing to do with what the government wants. Same with the Fed in the U.S.
I got a bridge I'd like to sell.
There you go. So you are of the view that interest rates will continue to increase over the next few months.
Yeah, and I'm basing that primarily on the fact that the rest of the world hasn't moved as fast as North America.
Or Canada.
No, Canada's worse than the U.S. or more accelerated than the U.S. Europe is way behind. And so, I think there's going to be more pressure on interest rates as we go forward.
Well, and Europe has some significant issues that they're dealing with at the moment.
Some other problems.
So, yeah, I'm of the view that you shouldn't listen to guys on podcasts make predictions because we don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
But if I had to predict, I would say, okay, we had 100 basis point increase in the middle of July. It would not surprise me if I think September is the next one. I don't know if they meet in August because can't meet every month. These are government employees. It wouldn't surprise me if they had another increase.
Yeah, they won't go immediately from 100% to nothing in the next one.
That just doesn't make sense.
Sends the wrong signal.
Unless inflation all of a sudden becomes deflation, which seems highly unlikely because, again, it's a lagging indicator, right? And unemployment is also a lagging indicator.
Yep.
Because you already said it. If we need to gear up, it takes us 6 months to a year to hire new staff, train them, get an office, computers, whatever. Once you've hired someone and you've got them trained and you see that your sales in your business are going down a little bit, you don't immediately fire everybody.
Right.
It's like, oh, well, it may be a temporary thing. So I think the unemployment rate lags somewhere between, 6 months and a year and a half.
Maybe.
To what's actually going on. So if I had to predict, I would say, yes, I expect we will see at least one more interest rate increase, maybe two. I don't think the next one will be 100 basis points.
I didn't think the last one would
but
be 100.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know anybody who predicted 100. No. So, okay, maybe it will be 100 again. Maybe it'll be less. I don't know. But I think that by the end of the year, it will become obvious that, okay, we've really pooched the economy.
Right.
Nobody's buying a house anymore. House prices have collapsed, stock market, the whole bit. And government's like happy.
Yeah.
So we got to start reducing interest rates is kind of what I expect to happen. But we've been wrong before. Now, you mentioned CRA. So explain what you think, what is happening? You're on the phone with people every day. What are you seeing from CRA these days?
Well, so during the pandemic, it was clear that the instructions were ask for overdue taxes or outstanding returns, but ask nicely and don't push too hard. And what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months is a gradual move towards more aggressive badgering. So they're not doing a whole lot of wage garnishes and account freezings yet. Although literally in the last 3 weeks, we've seen significantly more of that. They're going to continue with that. The government can't continue to not collect money forever. At some point, they got to get back to it. And so with consumer insolvencies, there's a certain number of people that self-discipline. They know they're in trouble. They want to correct the problem before it gets any worse. There's a certain portion of people that somebody's got to push them. And the heaviest pusher is CRA. So they freeze your bank account. They garnish your wages. They send a notice of demand to pay to somebody that just scares the bejesus out of you. So now it's time to act. Next tier down from that would be the courts and the collection agencies. Again, we're talking about CRA right now.
Yeah. And I'm of the view that CRA is kind of like an elephant. They're fast asleep in the corner of the room. Pandemic's on. They're worried about getting CERB out and all that kind of stuff. And everybody's working on that. And then slowly the elephant wakes up and is a little bit disoriented and starts walking around the room, trampling everything in its path. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere and boom. And it's not necessarily a coherent strategy that this is exactly what we're going to do.
Right.
But you're right. When the pandemic hit, the focus was on, we got to get money in people's hands. Let's not bother trying to collect because nobody has any money anyways.
Right.
So all the agents got put on the CERB lines. Obviously, CERB is long since done. Everyone now, hopefully, has filed their taxes for both 2020 and 2021. Okay. And so if you got CERB or CRB, you perhaps owe some taxes on it. And probably your climate action incentive payment wasn't enough to wipe out your taxes owing.
You think?
Probably not. So now you've got this Revenue Canada debt. As you said, the proactive ones are phoning us saying, well, look, I filed my taxes. I know I owe the money.
Let's do something.
The less proactive are saying, well, CRA hasn't actually called me yet. Right. They just sent me on my CRA account a note that says you owe the money. And so, you know what? I got other pressures.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to ignore that.
Well, and I got to pay more for gas. My food bill's gone up. I'm going to worry about those. Those are urgent things today. I'm not going to worry so much about CRA. The level of activity at CRA tends to be lower in the summer as well. I mean, most people take vacations in the summer.
Right.
And CRA even more so because they're very busy during tax season, so it's more likely that there's fewer people. So collection activity does fall in the summer.
We're at a low point in the cycle.
We're at the low point. Plus, they're all, for the most part, still working from home.
That's right. They got their 1 day a week for printing or whatever it is.
Literally. So in order to garnish someone's wages, they have to send a requirement to pay notice to the employer, which is a piece of paper.
Right.
They can't send an email to your employer.
Not allowed to do that.
Well, they don't have your employer's email address.
Right, but they're not allowed to do it.
And they're not allowed to do it anyways because everyone thinks it's spam.
Right.
So if you can only get into the office 1 day a week to print a piece of paper, it's kind of hard to do that. Putting a lien on a house, I'm guessing that probably involves a piece of paper too.
At least one.
So we're not at that stage yet. Now, if CRA gets to the point in the fall where, okay, we can come into the office a couple of days a week, then that doubles collection activity.
Yep. And it's whenever they start doing that, it's going to seem like an avalanche, folks, because we've all gotten used to 2 years of very little activity. So if you double little activity, well, it seems like a hell of a lot. And they actually got to get to 4 or 5 times their current level of activity
to get back to where they even were. So yeah, if you go through a drought period and then there's a bit of rain, it's like, oh man, that was a typhoon. Oh no, it was just a little bit of rain. It's all relative. So
well, and the dry wash floods because it's just so rock hard.
Right.
It just flows right through.
There's nothing there. So again, your prediction on CRA then is what?
We will continue to see increased levels of activity, particularly after Labor Day. So I think after Labor Day, they'll definitely go to the 2 days a week. And then by Christmas, it'll be 3 days a week, or some of them will be back to work.
Or they'll figure out how to print remotely.
Yeah, they won't figure that out.
I mean, we've been doing it for 15 years, I think.
They won't figure that out.
I can sit at my house and send something to the photocopier down the hall there. But okay, so I said that the purpose of this show was not just to, woe is me, everything's bad. It was to give practical advice. So, okay, what's your advice? Here we are. It's the middle of summer, 2022. Okay. What are you telling people?
So, we don't have near the number of clients that used to own houses as we used to. Like it used to be 1 out of 3 of our clients owned a house. Now it's 3 out of 100. If you have the ability to renew your mortgage now, I would seriously consider it. And most companies will allow you to renew 6 months before your maturity date. It's really too late. You should have done this 3 or 4 months ago. And I believe we said that. But regardless, don't leave it much longer because it's only going to get worse for if you have to renew in the next 6 months, interest rates are going to be higher than they are today, even though they're already ridiculously high.
And we talked about this on last week's show, doing your own personal stress test.
Yep.
So if interest rates go up another percentage point, how does that affect me? And the answer might be, I got lots of money. I almost paid my mortgage off. It's no big deal. Okay, then don't worry about it. But if you bought a house in the last year or two and you're fully mortgaged and now the price of the house is perhaps coming down and we've got higher interest rates, the stress test, all that kind of thing, locking in is probably not a bad idea.
Right. And what most people are going to end up doing is extending the amortization period. Because let's say you had your mortgage at 2.5%, it was $1,500 a month. You're now renewing at 4.5%. Your mortgage payment is now $2,500 a month. So where'd that extra $1,000 going to come from? Yeah. Well, if you amortize it over an extra 10 or 15 years, maybe that's only $300.
And again, we're not
telling you how to do
exactly.
this. Right.
I don't know what's going to happen to interest rates, clearly.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen to inflation, all the rest of it. And it could be that we are at the peak of interest rates and they're all going to come down. And when you renew your mortgage, it'll be lower. And so you shouldn't have locked in. And
everything will be great.
Everything will be wonderful. The correct strategy for the last 15 years has been to get a variable rate mortgage.
Right.
Is that going to be the correct strategy for the next 15 years? I don't know.
If rates are increasing, it's a very dangerous strategy.
And I realize that the fixed rate is higher than the variable rate. So if the fixed rate is 5% and the variable rate is 4%, then the variable rate has to come up by a full percentage point to get to me to where the fixed rate is. So I understand why the majority of mortgage originations right now are variable as opposed to fixed.
Right.
But you got to look at your own personal situation. Would I feel better locking in so I know exactly what the payment is for the next 5 years and not having to worry about it?
And just ask anybody with a variable rate how their payments have changed in the last 6 months, because usually they adjust every quarter.
Yep. If you have a HELOC where you're paying interest only, it adjusts instantly.
Right.
If you have a variable rate where the term is set, then, okay, your principal portion is being reduced as the interest rate goes up. You might not notice it in your monthly payment, but eventually you have to pay the piper.
Well, so the majority of our clients aren't homeowners anymore. That's just not the way the world is, although a significant number that call us are. So let's talk about the rest of the people. Your biggest fear or concern right now is all this inflationary pressure. So we know that gas prices went up a crazy amount in the last 4 or 5 months, and they've started to come down again. How far down are they going to come? Let's hope that they go down significantly more. If they stay where they're at, you're still worse off than you were 3 months ago because it's significantly higher. Food prices seem to be going up. I mean, my biggest fear for people is their monthly budget. We know that credit card debts went down. Your first response when expenses go up, well, you can't increase your income, so you incur more debt. You adjust by putting more money on credit. So that's what gets people in trouble.
You are a believer in keeping your debt levels as low as possible.
And that probably just makes sense given the type of people that we are.
That's right. And again, we're realists. You hit the nail on the head.
Right.
My food bill went up by $100.
It's got to come from somewhere.
My paycheck didn't go up by $100.
Right.
So what am I going to do? Well, I'm, eating less food. I'm buying cheaper food. I'm going whatever. But at some point, maybe I'll put it on my credit card because if things are going to be better in 3 months, I can pay it off.
Right.
And if they aren't, then that means you're incurring debt. So I think really the point of today's show is we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
Nobody does, but you want to at least be looking ahead and thinking, well, I've seen what happened over the last 6 months, how much food, gas has changed, inflation, interest rates, whatever. What if those things continue to change?
Right.
Where does that put me? Because maybe I'll try to pick up a part-time job now and put a couple extra bucks in the bank. Maybe I'll try to find a cheaper place to live. Maybe I'll get a roommate. Maybe I'll whatever. Because the sooner you can start making those adjustments, the better, rather than waiting till it's too late.
That's right.
And we'll be back in September and we'll see if the world has changed considerably since then. So excellent. Ted, thank you very much. Thanks for being part of seasons 1 through 8. So that
Ellen Pompeo is getting $1 million an episode.
I don't know who that is, but
it's Grey's Anatomy, 19th season.
There you go. I did not. Well, so
I don't watch TV, but I know that number because that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So in season number 19,
I'll get $1 million a show.
Yeah, if we're still here 11 years from now, we'll see. So that is our show for today. As I said, this is our last show for season number 8. Do you think it's kind of crazy that we have seasons in a podcast? That's something I just made up.
Well, probably.
Probably is.
But you're in charge. It's your podcast.
Do whatever I want.
You can do whatever you want.
Exactly. So we will be back on Saturday, September 3rd, which is Labor Day weekend, with all new shows for season number 9. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, for the month of August, we're going to replay 4 past episodes, so there won't be any new videos on YouTube. But if you're an audio podcast subscriber, which is where most of you are, I will record a brief introduction and update before that those rebroadcast shows. So if you haven't done so already, you got to hit the like button and the subscribe and the notification and the other things on all your podcast apps and YouTubes and whatever, so that you'll get notified of the audio rebroadcast in August and the new shows in September. So until September, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes. That was season number 8 of Debt Free in 30. $1 million an episode. That's what we're going for.
Makes you wonder.
Well, the